of us. And I think I speak on behalf of all the organisers to send huge sympathy to everybody who's experiencing this at the moment. It's really not a great place to be. So whilst we recognise that, there's also an additional urgency, I think, to the current moment, in that over the last 10 years or more, there's been a huge gap between how we perceive our subject as really helpful for our students in terms of employability and skills, really helpful to the economy and the nation, and the perceptions of it that other people have. And that's been a very difficult thing to negotiate. And the extra difficulty at the moment is that lots of senior management are really doubling down on that at the moment, when at this particular moment with AI, with lots of economic challenges, community challenges around inequality, English and its cognate sister disciplines are really needed more than ever. And most recently, there's been a few signs really, that people are getting that message. The Forbes business magazine recently cited English as the most versatile degree that graduates might have. And that's a really important thing to bear in mind. So we need our message to get across most effectively. So today, what we'll be doing for the first half of the meeting is sharing information about resources, about the campaigns that are running, about the advocacy that lots of us are doing. And that first half of the meeting is going to be recorded. So Becky, if you get the chance to start us recording, that would be fantastic. We'll then have a very short break. The second half of the meeting will not be recorded because we'll be hearing much more confidential and personal stories from some of our colleagues who've been through restructuring and who are going to share their experience of that, some tips for how to get through it, some advice, and then we'll open up for a broad discussion at the end. There are lots of people here though, and lots to get through. So we're going to ask you please to put any questions that you've got for the individual panelists into the chat, and they'll answer in the chat as they get the chance to do that. And for the final part of the meeting, when the discussion is really open to everybody, we would again ask you please to put questions or points in the chat. And Bob Eagleston and I will chair that final session and surface as many questions and points as we possibly can during that session. And if we can't, then obviously we'll be looking at those comments at the end to see what use we can make of them. So I'm sorry that you probably won't get the chance to speak those questions yourself, but as you can see, we've got so many people coming in that we really want to make sure that we get as many ideas represented as possible in the chat. Seems the best way of doing that, and of course it's there for everybody to refer back to as well. So thank you very much for being here, and I'm going to hand over now to Bob Eagleston, who's going to chair the first two panels. Thanks, Bob.
Hi everybody, I'm Bob Eaglestone. I'm Professor of Contemporary Literature and Thought at Royal Holloway, University of London, and I'm the policy lead for the English Association. So our first session is on the support that some of the organisations in our discipline can offer. We've got three speakers I'm going to introduce briefly and then get on with it. So first is Professor Claire Lees, who's a Professor of Medieval Literature and the History of Language. She's Director of the Institute of English Studies at the University of London, and she was on the REF panel. Our second speaker is Professor Jenny Richards. She's the English 2001 Chair at Cambridge, and she's the chair of the English Association, and she also chairs our REF panel. And our third speaker in the session is Catherine Welchester. She's a reader in English literature and subject lead for English and creative writing at Liverpool John Moores, and she's the chair of University English. So that's our kind of three major HG organisations, and I'm going to turn straight over to the panel. So I think Claire, you're starting.
Actually, Bob, Kate's starting and I'm going middle and Jenny's rounding up. So over to Kate.
Morning, everyone. Thanks, Bob. Thanks, Claire. So yes, I'm Kate Walchester, and I was elected chair of the University English in April. So I've been doing a lot of catching up, really, in the sense that I know that this work, and I know Jenny's going to speak to this and, in a moment, and Claire, this work has been going on for a long, long time. So I can speak as a relative newbie to all this. And over the last few months, as Gail said at the beginning in her introduction, this work has been particularly busy. It's been a frenetic and busy few months in terms of supporting the supporting departments and meeting colleagues. So I was going to open really by talking very generally about some of the things that we do as the three subject associations: University English, the Institute for English Studies, and the English Association. And the work that Claire Lees, Catherine Baxter and myself have done over the last few months in trying to support departments, and then I'll hand over to colleagues for a sort of more in-depth discussion of the things that have historically been done and the things that they found successful. So generally, we would start by meeting the department and talking really about the particular context in which they found themselves, because clearly every department is different, the relationship with management is different, and the pressures that the timescales that they're working to are often very different. So by chatting to the department, we've really sort of discovered the sort of particular context that colleagues have found themselves. Some of the ideas in which we put forward to colleagues that we can help them with are data collection and finding the right data, finding appropriate data, and relevant and impactful data that might be of use in writing consultation, responding to consultation, and writing counter proposals. So we direct departments to appropriate resources, and Jenny's going to say a little bit more about that. Particularly the EA have excellent pages with resources on which go through some of these aspects in turn through a series of bullet points and links, which are very, very helpful. So we direct departments to those. We offer advice on counter proposals, speaking to sort of context and the structures that are particular to the departments, as I've said, and we encourage departments wherever possible to try and speak positively towards the issues and the problems that context is presenting. So management come with a series of issues and problems that they need to solve, and quite often it's important to sort of pivot the conversation towards speaking directly towards those issues and concerns. We've directed departments recently to thinking about where their institution sits nationally, internationally, a regional context of employment and connections, and also thinking about how they as a department might be speaking more broadly across the university, so the contributions that department has made more broadly across particular institutions and the regional context. And finally, the other things we've done are drafting, and always with the agreement of the departments and the encouragement of the departments that we're working with, public and private letters of support to management and beyond. So as you can see, a sort of an individualized approach, and I think that's why over the years, I want to really pay tribute to the colleagues that have preceded me in this and the time that it's taken because of this approach of working with departments, and rather than just sort of giving very generalized advice. So I'll pass over to Claire, and she can give you more of a history and give you more of a sense of the sorts of things that have been done and can be done to support colleagues.
Thanks very much, Kate. It's been a pleasure working with you already over those past several months, and I think it's quite important that we have a team of people working collectively and collaboratively in confidence with those who reach out to us. That has always been the model, whether it's Kate, our most new member, Catherine Baxter, who isn't unfortunately able to be here. I've worked with Ben Davis, I've worked with Gail, and I've worked with Jenny, and there have been others. So this has been going on for several years, but as Kate has already said, the last few months have really upped the speed of response. So just to underline what Kate said already, I think what we can offer is cross-sectoral experience, confidential listening, led by you reach out to us, and we learn from you through those meetings that Kate's already mentioned, where and how best to point you in the direction of resources and support. Kate's already mentioned some of those. We have a toolkit, we offer data, we offer a growing body, I think, of collective experiences we've handed over as the group has evolved over the years. I think the thing that's quite helpful is that you can be reassured that we can say things like, don't worry, there is always time. Even though you feel under pressure, we will respond as quickly and as promptly as we can. And we have always done that. If it means working over weekends or overnight, we've managed to do that. Sometimes it's 2 of us, sometimes it's 3 of us, sometimes it's 1 of us. It is surprising the amount of overlap. And as Kate says, I think it's really important that you get 2 or 3 different perspectives all the time, because we don't always say the same thing. I think also what's very critical is that we can remind you not that though you're in an extremely difficult present and you need to develop your responses, your business cases, your counter proposals quickly, you do also need to support each other and have an eye to the future. So I think one of the things that we're learning is how valuable it is for you to have a sense of a disciplinary direction, whether it's locally in your area or nationally or indeed internationally. So resources, collaboration, confidence, confidentiality, and then that reminder of what, if this is what it's like now, well, what's it going to feel like in a couple of years? How can we help you rebuild? So finally, I'm just going to just add a few remarks about, from our perspective, and this is only our perspective, how this feels in terms of efficacy, this sort of confidential activity. I think success is going to be measured by the individual institution. We've had some successes that we've managed to celebrate, but because it's in confidence, we can't broadcast that, nor should we, but you should know that the future direction is that we can always make a difference. There are always some quick wins that we can offer, and above all, there's 2 critical points, I think, here, that's emerged over the number of years that I've been doing this work. One is colleagues find the support that our organisations can offer helpful. You're not just in it on your own. It's quite surprising how, to me at least, how often we get thanked for the work that we do. So support works, but so too, and this is critical, does sharing your experiences. Collectively, as a discipline, we're growing a body of experiences. And I would encourage you all to, even though it is hard, and we're going to hear from some people shortly about their own individual experiences, I do encourage you us all to share our experiences. It does help. And with that, I'm going to pass over to Jenny. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Catherine and Claire. I mean, Becky may be able to share a slide, but I can manage without it. So I've just got some of the links to the 3 things I want to talk about. But I want to start by reiterating what Gail said right at the start about extending our sympathy to anybody who's going through this. We all have friends and partners who are facing this really, really difficult time. But I also want to thank Catherine, Kate and Claire for doing this work right now. The whole thing is discombobulating and emotionally draining for everybody. And with that in mind, one of the things that the EA is thinking about, and other people may want to, and I'm sure we'll have this conversation also with UE and with IES, is about expanding the team of people. So that it doesn't, because it's, it takes time, doesn't it? And I really love the way in which both of you were describing the kind of personalised approach to that. It's absolutely essential. But I want to talk a little bit about some of the resources that we, as the 3 subject bodies, have built up over the years. So this has been going on for about 10 years. I think the first university where contraction happened, and where we had to get our act together very quickly, if you remember, Claire, was Portsmouth, Ben Davies's university. And it wasn't just me and Claire, it was there were a number of people who gathered together. Bob was there, I think Gail was there, Alex Thompson was there as well. And that's when we started to think really carefully about what we might need to support people. And we've been building up resources ever since over those 10 years and adjusting and adapting as time has gone on. So I've put up on the website a few their headings that you can find very easily. You can Google them very easily. The one is our page of supporting English departments, and that covers some of the information that Kate and Claire were just providing. But in addition to that is the toolkit we built together, and that has data collected from the British Academy, which has been recently updated by Catherine Baxter. So we use a lot of the statistical data that the British Academy have collected over the years. And I also want to pay tribute here to the people who did the early collecting, and that's both Bob Eaglestone and also the late Catherine Heavey from Glasgow University. I do not want to forget Catherine's contribution. The second thing that's really important, we have found when in the early days, we often talked to vice chancellors. I suspect that that's not an easy thing to do now. And we found that we needed to have crystal clear data, especially on the numbers for English. And Alex Thompson will update that page annually for us. And he'll do so again in August. It was one of the things, this really came from University English and the work of Susan Bruce and Alex. We've realised very early on that the data that was being used by universities for English was inaccurate. It elided too many different subjects, including the teaching of English as a foreign language. And so we needed to disaggregate. And so we update that information regularly. And the third thing I want to talk about is the Skills for the Future work that the English Association has been doing. This has been led by Cathy Schrank at Sheffield University. It's got two things. We've talked to students so that they can explain to us what English means to them in their own voices. And then we started to develop a series of alumni case studies. And there's more work of that kind also that's been created by the University English Creates campaign. So this is really crucial because we still get from parents the question, what can you do with English? And as we all know, there are a lot of things you can do with that. But there's something else we're doing on top of that, and I'll be coming out through the subject bodies with an offer, I hope, quite soon. It's this collective My Skills project that we're trying to launch. And we've done some work on it in the EA this year. And that is partly because one of the things we found in the early days when we were going out with our letters and meeting with vice chancellors, we found that the tone was really important. Being positive mattered, so not just complaining, no matter how angry or furious we felt with the management, but also trying to tell a story where we were providing some solutions. One of the solutions we started to think about as EA was to create hubs around English departments at risk, but that was really very time consuming and quite hard to do. So that work has been translated into the GCSE reform work, which you'll hear about in a moment. But the other thing we want to do now, so we've got a kind of positive contribution to make and a way to speak back to universities, is the granular work we want to do around understanding skills. And we may be that we have another meeting on that when I've been able to talk with my colleagues a bit more and set something up. But the idea is that we take ownership of skills and we work more with the British Academy to change their narrative. But that is enough from me, I think.
Thank you so much, Jenny, Claire and Kate. There are no questions in the chat, so they're kind of brewing. So I think we might move on to the next session, if that's okay. So thank you very much for that. So the next session concerns the English Creates campaign and wider advocacy work that we're doing. And our three speakers, I don't know the order, I'm afraid, are John Roach, who's a senior lecturer in English at Manchester. He's on the UE executive and he coordinates the English Creates campaign, and he organised the very successful English Creates symposium last month. Ben Davies, who is Professor of Literature at the Department of Culture and Language at the University of Southern Denmark. He was chair of University English. He's on the REF panel. And Alistair Brown, who's Associate Professor, Digital Humanities and Modern Literature at Durham. He's also on the UE executive, and he ran one of the really exciting sessions at English Creates Symposium in July on social media influence and online communities. So, John, if you're starting.
I think it is me first, isn't it? Thanks, Bob.
Take it away.
We've got some slides. I think, Becky, are you okay to put those up for us?
Yep, on it now. Just give me one moment and they're on their way.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah, so I'll start while we're waiting for those to come up, just by saying thank you very much to Gail and everyone who's worked so hard to put together this day at such short notice. I'm John, as Bob has mentioned. I'm at the University of Manchester, and I'm relatively new to the advocacy work around English studies, but I just want to say as well how massively emboldened and proud I am to be working alongside people like Claire, Jenny, and Kate, as well as Gail, Bob, Ben, and others on this. I've been learning very quickly this year since taking over as the coordinator of the English Creates campaign from Andrew McRae, who did a brilliant job for 2 years before that at the University of Exeter. So we can go to the next slide. Becky, thanks. I'm just going to use this presentation to introduce English Creates. Some people here will know about this campaign, will have been involved in it, might have been at the symposium that took place a couple of weeks ago that Bob mentioned. We're massively grateful for all the support that we've had, but also we're very aware that everyone's busy. You can't always be across all of the campaigning work that's out there. So I want to use this to explain a little bit what the campaign has been, is, hopes to be, is for, and how it can help in this particularly difficult context as well. So English Creates emerged as a campaign from a meeting of University English colleagues back in 2023. So it's been running for a few years. It's a voluntary campaign run by people in English studies, for people in English studies at university in particular, but of course it extends beyond and coheres with the work that we've just heard being done by the Institute for English Studies and as well by the English Association. So over the past few years, English Creates has sought to produce excellent quality infographics and data analysis, alumni profiles, interactive skills and employability resources, as well as audio-visual materials on the far-reaching value, the impact, the importance of English degrees. All of those things are freely available via the University English website already. The idea behind this is really I think initially was to respond to what we saw already back in 2023 as a very difficult context, at times a hostile context, with, as Jenny's just been mentioning, a sort of positivity, really, a kind of optimism about the subject, being on the front foot and trying to gain momentum. Of course, hoping that a situation like the one that we're experiencing at the moment wouldn't come around, but knowing that it might, and that therefore having some years of momentum behind us by that point would be very useful and important for us all. So that advocacy work already exists there on the website, and hopefully you can draw on those resources. Some of the slides after this one will show you in more detail about those, but hopefully you can draw on those resources in putting together counter proposals and business cases. It's sort of ready-made for English university departments. Each year of the campaign since 2023, when it was established, has sought to focus on a slightly different topic relating to English. So we've done a lot of work on employability in 2024, the impact of the subject in 2025, and this year thinking more broadly about its social, economic and political value in the contemporary moment. We have grown our social media accounts and sort of put out material across various platforms and in various media. And as we've mentioned already, this culminated a couple of weeks ago, this year's campaign, with the English Creates Futures online symposium. Some of you were there, I know. which reached a really strong audience in the UK and beyond. So we know already that we have some momentum, we have interest in the campaign, and I think it's going to be a really important one strand of many, as we've already been hearing, kind of part of our response to the situation. So Becky, we can move to the next slide. Thank you. Yeah, so I'm just going to use the next few slides just to show you in more detail what's there on the University English website already, what has been produced by English Creates. I should mention that this is although I'm coordinating the campaign, there is a team, a brilliant committee of colleagues from English departments across the country who have also been organising it, who've been absolutely spectacular in their various different ways in pulling some of this material through. So we've got in the top left and bottom right, you can see these are interactive resources that students can use to think about the skills and knowledge that they gain through their English degrees in relation to specific industries. We've got a video there in the top right, the sort of thing that, I mean, it features recent graduates of English as well as colleagues teaching the subject, advocating for English degrees, the sort of thing that might work very well, for example, at open days, but also in other admissions contexts and related contexts. And bottom left is just a kind of example of some of the alumni profiles that we've put together. We have sought to find alumni who are working in perhaps more surprising contexts as well. So trying to sort of go back to what Gail was saying at the start about Forbes recently mentioning English as the most versatile degree you can have, trying to find ways of showing how that then translates in the real world. That's what some of the alumni profiles attempt to do. Becky, we can move through again. Thank you. Yeah, this year's campaign, so over the past 6 months, some of you will have seen this on social media, we have had a team of brilliant curators, subject experts from across the field who have put together, along with, I think really importantly, along with current students and past students as well as teachers in different sorts of contexts working in English studies, a series of curated materials on different topics, trying to showcase, as I mentioned before, the value of English in its different forms. So those blogs are again available on the University English website. They are very, very wide ranging. And again, I think they're quite short. They give data, they give links. It's the sort of thing that again we can use, I think, to put together business cases, to talk back to management about what it is that this subject is doing, because I think that has been too obscure for them at various times. Okay, Becky, thank you. Yeah, this has included as well work by, for example, a team of students from the University of Reading, current students who maybe have just graduated, but their assessed work was also part of this, and it was on AI. So there's a whole sort of raft of materials on the website there produced by current students thinking about how artificial intelligence relates to English studies. And a lot of the time, the material there is very useful for us because it's not, as it were, a kind of defensive thing that the students are doing. They're not sort of just thinking about AI as a problem, but how they can harness it and how it might help us to refashion the subject in these new contexts that we find ourselves in. So again, a lot of this work is student-led, which I think is really important for us because that helps us very much in speaking back to management. Thanks, Becky. Yeah, and also I think something that we focused on more and more over the past 6 months as we've upped our social media engagement is just trying to think about how we can harness relatively simple imagery and narratives to counter the narratives around English studies, the humanities more broadly, but specifically English studies that have been there over the past sort of 10, 15 years longer. And in response to which English Creates was set up in the first place. So this is a recent example. This was something that came out of the campaign when everything happened around Andy Burnham recently, pointing out, of course, that Burnham is an English graduate himself, and trying to use that just to sort of piggyback that particular narrative and utilize that momentum in order to again demonstrate, I suppose, all of the different ways in which English studies is perhaps to some people a surprisingly versatile and important subject in many different contexts. And then I think I've got one last slide, Becky, after this. Yes, so this is just a brief note. It's something that I think was mentioned by the previous speakers as well. English Creates is a campaign formed by English departments at universities. We want to work as well across the subject in its different contexts as well. I think the important thing that I want to say here is that it thrives on your engagement and feedback. We'd love more people to be involved, but we'd also love more people to feel free to feed into us as a team, to let us know how we can advocate for you most effectively. So if there are things that you think are missing, things that you think would be most useful right now, we are currently putting together the next year of the campaign. And of course, we want that to be as effective as ever, and to be as responsive, I think, to the specific pressures that different departments are facing. So please do reach out to me, reach out to us via the email address you can see there on the slide, and let us know what we can do as a team of advocates for you as well. Okay, with that, am I handing over to you, Ben?
Unless Alistair wanted to say anything. But I think we're...
No, I'm okay.
Okay.
I was going to pop something in the chat, so I'll do it
thanks,
that way
Alistair.
for time. Yeah.
Okay, Becky, can we just have the slides again, please? Hi, everyone. I'm Ben Davis, and I just want to talk about some of the latest developments in advocacy and campaigning for the discipline. So this builds on long-standing work the three organisations have been doing, but over the last 8 months or so, the Institute for English Studies, the English Association, and University English have been working together with Nigel Newton, who's the founder and CEO of Bloomsbury Publishing, to further advocate for the discipline, particularly to raise the profile of English in political and policy-making circles. We can flick through, Becky, if possible. And I think what was interesting here was that it was actually Nigel Newton, who's an English graduate himself, who reached out to us to say how can he support the discipline. So I think that's a good message, that we have supporters out there with important contacts, drive, enthusiasm, and resources. I don't know if the slides can go forward a bit. Great. Okay. So following a preliminary meeting that Claire Lees hosted at Senate House, we organised and hosted a parliamentary breakfast for English, which took place in the Houses of Parliament in just last month in June. And this event was hosted by Lord Baker, and in attendance alongside representatives from the three discipline organisations were Lord Strathcarron, Lord Chris Smith, who, as you may know, recently became the Chancellor of Cambridge. I have to say was an excellent advocate for the discipline, very supportive. Samir Ahmed, the journalist. We also had colleagues from executive recruitment companies, a member from the National Literacy Trust, and some teachers, undergraduates, and school pupils as well. So the purpose was really to stress both the sort of seriousness of the current situation and also the importance of the discipline to those with some political power and those with influence. And if we could just go on to the next slide, please, Becky. We had a soft launch, perfect. We had a soft launch of this Charter for Change, which is really about 4 key priorities for the discipline. So you can see them there: to celebrate the power of English and what it does, both in terms of teaching and research, to guarantee English is accessible to all who want to study it across the country, and as we know from the BA, to avoid cold spots, to nourish the ecosystem, so to really support the way in which primary, secondary, further education and higher education link up, and that's work led by the English Association, and then also to help change the conversation by providing the evidence that shows that English is an important discipline that contributes to the life of the nation, society, and culture. And if we could just move on to the next slide, Becky, thanks. And so we set out some of the priorities for the year, launching the English Charter for Change, aligning with the National Year of Reading, because initially universities weren't part of that. It's very much schools focused, and we've made some inroads there, working closely with the National Literacy Trust. Again, focusing on the work of the English Association to promote and advocate for change at GCSE and A levels, and also to identify high-profile champions, so Samir Ahmed, for example, who will help raise the profile of the discipline in public, and then importantly to fundraise for an advocacy and lobbyist position and a comms position. So I'll talk about that a little bit in a moment. And we ask the people there, and we continue to do this, to join us by endorsing the charter, by preparing them to speak up for English, and by becoming a champion. So if you just move to the next slide, Becky, thanks. So the next stage of this process comes in September, and we're meeting in Oxford, thanks to Helen Small for hosting us. We're going to be aided by, it's the advocacy group from the 3 associations and others, and we're going to be aided by a professional facilitator. And the aim of this is really to focus on our shared goals and to come up with the best strategies for how to raise the profile and importance of the discipline within those sort of important political policy making circles. And this will include one opportunity or one option for fundraising, as I said, for 2 posts, possibly one who will focus on policy and advocacy and one on comms. And they will work between the 3 disciplinary organizations. Because the aim is really to ensure that English is at the forefront of politicians' minds, it's a political priority, and that we have their ear and support. For instance, at the meeting, the breakfast meeting, we're sort of aiming to get Lords at least to raise questions in the House, so to get our discipline at the centre. And also that we're called upon, our colleagues are called upon, for instance, when there are any important items in the news, they often go to STEM colleagues, so to sort of rebalance that. And the importance of having 2 posts is that this would maximise what are our fairly limited resources amongst the 3 organisations, and also by recruiting people with expertise in those important areas. And the other thing we're going to focus on is a sort of proper launch of the charter, which we'll keep revising until we're satisfied with it, and by having our champions sign it. So just to finish here, as with the work that people have talked about already, of course, this is all for the benefit of the discipline. And I think there is a great sense of momentum at the moment, especially as we've been joined by people wanting to help us who have resources, drive, and ambition. So we'll keep everyone informed about this, and we will also consult with the community as we go, particularly around the charter and future plans. And just the final slide shows you some links to the charter and some further details. So please do read and share. And if you have any thoughts or suggestions, do contact us via the 3 representatives there. So I'll finish there. Thanks, Bob.
Thank you so much, Ben and John, and Alistair, who's put some really amazing things in the chat. Do you want to speak to those very briefly, Alistair, or are you happy just them being in the chat?
I mean, mainly I'm happy for them to be in the chat, but I think it is a narrative about turning the corner and the danger of departments kind of or management cutting off English just at the moment when it may be starting to prove its value in the future, compared to those STEM or particularly computing disciplines that have traditionally been valorized. So you know, there's a really important kind of narrative about the future that we need to get across here.
I think that's absolutely right. Thank you. Gail, I'm going to hand back over to you very briefly.
Thank you, colleagues. That was a really inspiring, as well as incredibly interesting, but a really genuinely inspiring presentation, showing that what we can do really, and the strength of the message we can get across, and the reasons why we do it, and the resources we have to get the message across. So I'm just going to hand over now to Bob, who's introduced himself, and to Becky Fisher, who's CEO of the English Association. They're going to talk about some of the work they've been doing around curriculum reform, their kind of pre-university work, which is so incredibly important. But as I do so, I'd like to say thank you very much to Becky, who's not only handling the skills and the meeting with aplomb, as she always does, but who's an absolutely crucial linchpin in all of this work that we're doing. She brings us all together and very generously enables UE and IES to work with the English Association, and does it with great skill and huge energy and enthusiasm and positivity, which are invaluable. So Bob and Becky, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'd like to echo what Gail says about Becky. She's wonderful to work with. Has done so much for the discipline. And sorry, I'm so sorry to say this, Becky. Can we start the slides? Is that okay?
Yes, just getting them going now.
Thank you. Thank you. So, folks, I'm going to talk a little bit about one of the things that Ben mentioned just now, which is to think about the wider ecosystem of our discipline, particularly within a kind of educational context. So if we just flick on the slide and cast your mind back to when you were learning biology, when you were 12 or 13 in school, thinking about the ecosystem of frog spawn and things. So here's a kind of quick map of our ecosystem, going from primary through Key Stage 3 and GCSEs to A-level, higher education, employment, teacher education, which then feeds back into that ecosystem. So one of the things we've been doing in the last, I guess, 10 years or so is trying to think about where the problems are in this ecosystem. And I think we all kind of know where they are, but I have a next slide which has scary red boxes on them that illustrate where some of the issues are. So I'm going to talk about one of these in particular, but these are sort of things that the three organizations have been working on for quite a long time. Obviously, recruitment into higher education, the wider crisis of our university. We talked about myth busting for English, recruitment to initial teacher education. But the one I'm going to, literacy, of course, is the Reading for Pleasure report is coming out tomorrow from the Education Select Committee. But the one I'm going to talk about now is the national curriculum, and particularly the GCSEs. So new GCSEs were introduced in 2013, first qualification in 2015, and I'm afraid that the consensus is that they are terrible. Here's something a teacher said something from a survey in 2019. We have killed this subject with the new terribly boring GCSEs. Okay, so the GCSEs were terrible. That meant fewer people did A-level, and we know from the figures that Alex Thompson collated that 14% of people who do A-level English go on to university. But if that pool is smaller, our recruitment is worse. So we think that the GCSEs are a crucial kind of pivot point for the decline in recruitment. So we've been working really hard on impacting the GCSEs. So we've worked on policy in all sorts of areas, but this is the one I'm going to focus on now to try and create an optimistic feeling that things are improving. Becky, could you flip to the next slide, please? Okay, so what do we do to help change the GCSEs? In 2023-24, we set up a working group on GCSE English reform, had academics, educators, teachers. We put together a report and then we circulated it. It was widely taken up by one of the awarding bodies, for example, talked about it a lot. The National Education Union talked about it. And in support of that, we held a huge event at the Globe. Emma Smith from Oxford helped organise that. We had over 100 policymakers, stakeholders, teachers and academics. And the point of that meeting was not just to share our woes, but to think about positive reforms, way we could impact things, a change we could make with the awarding bodies and how the A-levels are done, and with the DFE. Part of our policy work coming out of that was to input into the government's curriculum and assessment review. And I'm very pleased to say that from the working group's report, several recommendations about the GCSEs were taken up. However, as is the way of these things, the curriculum assessment review said lots of things that I think many of us would be very in favour of, but what it gave with one hand, it took away with the other. So it said lots of very positive things, but it didn't allow the structure to be changed as much as we would like to improve the GCSEs, make them more exciting. So the English Association and many organisations in the discipline, NATE, the National Association for Teaching of English, the UK Literary Association, many have been very involved with the new national curriculum and particularly with the two GCSEs. We're inputting, campaigning, arguing, influencing policy, finding as many ways as we can to improve and change the GCSEs and the teaching of English in the secondary stage, in Key Stage 3 and Key Stage 4, the GCSEs. So there's lots of work going on there, kind of behind the scenes with lots and lots of people. And some of the things, another time we'll talk about some of the things we've learned from that, but there are various interesting things that have arisen in the last 5 or 6 years. So we've been able to renew and build and create new relationships with civil servants, particularly in the DFE, where I think the cases for English that we've heard about from the other speakers are kind of landing. We've talked a lot to politicians, members of the House of Lords, and we've tried to talk to MPs. We've got meetings, some meetings scheduled coming up. We've certainly talked to policy teams, and we've been pulling together other organisations in the sector. So there's a body called the Common English Forum, which is literally a talking shop. So it's a place where about 17, 18, 19 organisations that are relevant to English come and exchange information to help build up a sense of what's going on across the discipline. And that organisation is kind of clerked by the English Association and has been adding new organisations that help build our discipline. The Royal Society of Literature, the School Library Association, the Society of Authors. So a sense of pulling our wider discipline together, just as that trio of the Institute of English Studies, University English and the English Association work so closely together. So the other organisations are all coming into dialogue and supporting the discipline to create a wider kind of support. And with that comes our attempts to engage with the media. It's very hard. There's a high churn in the media, but I think sorry, it sounds like a very Jane Austen-y kind of word, but we've cultivated relationships with lots of journalists, particularly in the educational press, but also in the national press. We had a meeting with The Economist about a year and a half ago to try and put our case. So this is quite hard kind of backroom work, but is going on through these through our main 3 organisations and trying to support our discipline. And that's the end of what I've got to say. So I'm going to pass over to Becky now.
Thank you very much, Bob. I will just speak for like one moment just to point you to a set of resources that you may find useful. We'll circulate these slides after, so don't feel you need to scramble with the QR codes right now. Jenny has already mentioned a few of these, but if I could point you possibly in particular to Why Choose English, which has a whole raft of resources that we can use in conversation with schools when they're supporting their students to choose their A-levels and their degree subjects, and obviously to encourage them to choose English. There's also a link there that will take you to all the work that we've been doing on curriculum assessment and reform, so you can stay up to date on what's happening there. And the final thing I'll point you to is the state of the subject. So this is an annual survey that we run. It's led by Anthony Rowland, and that collects a snapshot of what's happening in research and teaching and assessment in higher education. And this year we've also added a couple of new questions, particularly digging into the impact of restructures and AI. And we publish a report on that every year. And we also run an online workshop that's free, and anyone is welcome to attend, that helps kind of surface what's come out of that survey and the report, so that you can use that in your contexts. And that was it from me. Bob, do you have anything else you want to add?
No, I think we've come in under time. Do you want to address some of the issues that were come up in the chat?
There's quite a lot of chat about AI. I think mostly that's been dealt with in the chat, but we've got some discussion about skills, which I know EA is prioritising at the moment, and the possibility that we might work with scientists. Scientists are worried about their skills, says Jenny. So I wonder if we can think about ways in which English can address that. And also, there's been questions about lifelong learning priorities too. So, so possibly that's quite a good place to think about English feeding into as well.
So that's the lifelong learning priorities is a really excellent thing. And one of the one of the things the Common English Forum does is meet with the DFE fairly regularly. We have an agenda of things. We discuss 3 things with them each time, otherwise it would be too mad. But I think the lifelong learning priority might be a really good thing to add to that agenda.
Indeed. And Sophie Jones has just made a really important point about thinking about different national education systems as well. And whether, I mean, can you speak to whether the work on GCSEs is England specific?
Yeah, so I really can. That's a really complicated question. So I'm afraid the work on GCSEs is English specific. There's a new curriculum in Northern Ireland just been published. Scotland, of course, has a different system, and the Welsh system often kind of echoes the British. So one of the issues about trying to influence education policy is it is devolved, and we just don't have the capability to address it all, which is a terrible kind of loss or lack. So I'm afraid we did make the decision to focus on the English system, and I know that's a problem. We do have some comments on the Northern Irish curriculum, for example, that came out last month, but that is a really, really important point. And there are, I mean, for example, the situation in Scotland is slightly different. So there hasn't been so much of a drop in Scottish applicants to English, and in part that is because the hires weren't changed in the same way as the English GCSEs were. So there's all sorts of interesting things going on, but you know, we just don't have the capability to address it all, and that's why, for example, some of that campaign to get a policy post or a lobbying post that Ben was talking about is so important for our organisations.
Yeah, I'm slightly I regret putting Simon on the spot, but Simon Kaveshji is here from Glasgow, and I just wonder if it's worth, I know he's got to leave in a few minutes, wonder if it's worth just having a few words from you, Simon, about the Scottish situation, if you wouldn't mind. So I think it'd be quite useful to draw that in.
Bless you. Yeah, thank you. Hi, everyone. It's amazing to see so many people here. I think that the number of trends in Scotland are really different. Even in the British Academy report, it says the deep dive into the subject. It's clear that the trends that are very clear and have been for about 13 years in the rest of the UK around A-level and university level pickup for English are not the same in Scotland. It's possibly because, we don't really know why, but possibly because a lot of people do English as their 5th hire, because you do 5 hires rather than 3. English has a better retention rate as well for boys in sixth form, as we call it generally across the UK, and it's therefore we don't see a decline in English in Scotland. The main problem in Scotland, of course, is the funding model, which is even worse in Scotland for arts and humanities subjects than it is in the rest of the UK in terms of what we get as universities for each student head. But the subject itself is not in decline in Scotland. We haven't seen the same dips post 16 or in HE in the same way it is in the. That doesn't mean we don't face problems, but the problems are the broader one of the shitty funding model. I don't want Andy Burnham's poems or his memoir that he plans to write after his political career. I want a different funding model, because that's fundamentally the massive problem that all of our subjects face and all universities face. Anyway, that's it. Is that all you wanted, Gail?
Yes,
Good, go on.
Thank you. Thank you. Jenny's got a hand up as well. Jenny, do you want to come in?
So sorry, I have to leave, but I wanted to, this will save me having to, I'll put something in the chat. Around the skills work, Becky can pick up any questions about that, but this is, next week I'm going to put together a plan. I've shared the link about what we're trying to do with scientists, so this will be a cross subject project, I hope. We're also working, I've got a meeting tomorrow with STEM learning. I really need to get going with it. I'd love to have critical friends. I want to work across the 3 subject bodies. It's just been incipient and that's a slow grow, but I think we'll be ready to get going. So I'll put my email in the chat. Just drop me a line and Becky can pick up questions. But thank you so much. Thank you, Gail and Bob, for organising this absolutely essential and really helpful meeting. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks, Jenny. Thanks for coming along. We're pretty much at time now. So, Bob, unless you've got a few more words you want to say? Okay, so we've built in a quick coffee break, so let's reconvene at 11:10. Thanks very much, everyone. See you very shortly.